Friends, here is something nobody explains about Social Security before you lose a spouse. When one check stops, the other one changes too. And the size of that surviving check, the income your spouse will live on after you are gone, was locked in years ago, on the day the higher earner filed. It did not feel like a survivor benefit decision at the time. It felt like a personal income decision. They are the same number. Today I am going to walk you through exactly how the survivor benefit is calculated, why the higher earner's filing age is the single most important number in this entire conversation, and what options remain if your household has not yet filed. This is not a video about avoiding a mistake you already made. It is a video about understanding a decision most couples do not realize they are making until it is too late to change it. Quick note, this is education, not personalized legal or financial advice. Please talk with a Social Security specialist or fiduciary planner about your household's specific situation. Stay with me through Joan's story, and near the end, I will show you what her friend Pat did differently and what that difference meant. Let me tell you about Joan. Joan and her husband Mark were married for 41 years. They raised 2 children in the same house. They retired within a year of each other, in the same town they had lived in their whole lives. Mark had worked in construction management for 38 years. He was the higher earner in the household. His projected Social Security benefit at his full retirement age of 67 was $2,600 a month. Joan had worked part-time for many of those years while raising their children, and her own Social Security benefit was smaller, approximately $900 a month at her full retirement age. When Mark turned 62, he was tired. Construction work had worn on his body for decades. He wanted to stop, travel a little, and stop worrying about money coming in. He filed for Social Security at 62. His monthly benefit locked in at approximately $1,820, a permanent 30% reduction from his full retirement age amount. It felt like the right call. He had earned it. He wanted to enjoy the money while he still had the energy to enjoy it. For 12 years, that decision looked completely fine. Mark and Joan lived comfortably. They traveled a little. They spent time with grandchildren. The household income worked. Then, at 74, Mark passed away unexpectedly. In the weeks that followed, amid the grief and the paperwork and the phone calls, a Social Security notice arrived. It explained that Joan would now receive a survivor benefit, the higher of her own benefit or Mark's benefit. Mark's benefit was higher. Joan would now receive $1,820 a month. Their combined household income before Mark passed away had been $2,720 a month, his $1,820 plus her own $900. Now, as a survivor, Joan receives only Mark's $1,820. Her own $900 no longer applies separately. Joan's household income dropped by approximately 33%, while her fixed costs, her home, her utilities, largely stayed the same. Nothing about this was an error. Nothing about this was unusual. This is simply how the survivor benefit works. But Joan had never been told clearly what would happen to her income if she outlived Mark. Let me ask you something. If you are married, do you know right now what your spouse would receive in Social Security if you passed away tomorrow? If the honest answer is that you are not sure, you are not alone. Most couples have never run this specific number. To understand what happened to Joan, you need to understand exactly how the survivor benefit is calculated, because it is simpler than most people expect, and that simplicity is exactly why it gets overlooked. When one spouse passes away, the surviving spouse does not keep both benefits. They receive the higher of the two, either their own benefit or their late spouse's benefit. The smaller check stops entirely. The larger one continues for the rest of the surviving spouse's life. This means the amount a surviving spouse receives is not calculated fresh at the moment of death. It is simply whatever the higher earner's benefit had already become based on the age they filed. If the higher earner filed at 62, their benefit was permanently reduced by up to 30%. That reduced number becomes the survivor benefit. If the higher earner delayed to their full retirement age, or all the way to 70, their benefit was correspondingly larger. That larger number becomes the survivor benefit instead. This is the entire mechanism. Whatever the higher earner locked in, for better or worse, becomes the foundation the surviving spouse stands on, potentially for a decade or more. This is why I always say, for a married couple, the higher earner's filing decision is not just a personal income choice. It is, in a very real sense, a decision about the surviving spouse's future income. Now, there are a few important details that shape this calculation further, and they matter. First, the surviving spouse can claim a reduced survivor benefit as early as age 60. Claiming that early permanently reduces the survivor amount as well, separate from whatever the deceased spouse's filing age determined. Waiting until the survivor's own full retirement age to claim the survivor benefit avoids that additional reduction, meaning the survivor receives the full amount the deceased spouse had locked in, without an extra penalty layered on top. Second, if the surviving spouse remarries before age 60, they generally lose eligibility for the survivor benefit from the first marriage. Remarriage after 60 does not affect it. Third, and this is the detail that compounds Joan's situation further, when a spouse passes away, the surviving spouse's tax filing status generally changes to single after a transition period. Single filer thresholds for Social Security taxation and Medicare RMI are roughly half of married filing jointly thresholds. This means a surviving spouse can end up with less household income and at the same time face a higher percentage of that income being taxable simply because their filing status changed. Less income, a higher percentage of it taxed. This is the quiet, compounding part of losing a spouse that almost nobody explains in advance. Stay with me, because in a moment I want to show you what Joan's friend Pat experienced under nearly identical circumstances, but with one earlier decision made differently. But first, I want to address something that might be sitting with some of you right now. If your spouse has already passed away and they filed at 62, please hear this clearly. This was not a failure. It was a reasonable decision made with the information available at the time. Nobody sits down at 62 and calculates the exact circumstances of their own death. This video exists so that couples who have not yet filed can understand what is at stake. It is not here to add weight to a decision that has already been made and cannot be changed. Now let me tell you about Pat. Pat and her husband had been friends with Joan and Mark for over 20 years. Similar ages, similar income levels. Pat's husband was also the higher earner in their household. When Pat's husband turned 62, he also felt the pull to file early, the same tiredness, the same desire to enjoy retirement sooner. But before he did, Pat asked him one question. She asked, "If something happened to you, what would I actually receive?" Let's find out before you file, not after. That single question led them to a Social Security specialist. The specialist ran both scenarios, filing at 62 versus delaying to 70, and showed them side by side exactly what Pat's survivor benefit would look like under each one. Filing at 62, his benefit would lock in at approximately $1,820 a month, becoming Pat's survivor benefit floor if he passed away first. Delaying to 70, his benefit would grow to approximately $3,224 a month, becoming a survivor benefit floor that was $1,404 a month higher. Seeing that number side by side changed everything for them. Pat's husband delayed filing until 70. They used savings and Pat's smaller income to cover the gap in between. 8 years later, at 78, Pat's husband passed away, earlier than either of them expected, but not before his delayed filing had already locked in the higher amount. Pat's survivor benefit came in at $3,224 a month, not $1,820. Because 8 years earlier, one honest question changed what her husband's filing age would ultimately determine. Same friendship group, same general income level, same loss at different points in their lives. Joan lives on $1,820 a month alone. Pat lives on $3,224 a month alone. The difference was not luck. It was not a better financial advisor. It was one conversation, held years before either husband passed away, about a question most couples never think to ask. Now let's put the complete dollar picture on the table because seeing the full lifetime impact is what makes this conversation worth having. Joan's survivor benefit is $1,820 a month. Over a 10-year period as a widow, that totals $218,400. Pat's survivor benefit is $3,224 a month. Over the same 10-year period, that totals $386,880. The gap between them over just 10 years is $168,480. And that gap exists entirely because of a filing decision made decades earlier, one that had nothing to do with either woman's own work history. If either woman lives 15 or 20 years as a widow, that gap grows well past $250,000. This is not a small planning detail. For the surviving spouse, this number can be the difference between a comfortable, dignified retirement and one where every month requires careful counting. I want to say something here about time and health because it matters in this conversation too. Some higher earners delay filing because they are healthy and plan to work a bit longer anyway. Others delay specifically because they understand what it means for their spouse. Both are valid reasons. But the second reason is one most couples never even get the chance to consider because nobody ever framed the decision that way for them. You can always make more money in the years you have together. You cannot go back and change a filing decision after your spouse is gone. All right, friends, let's bring this home with a checklist you can use this week, especially if you have not yet filed. I want you to imagine we're sitting at your kitchen table together, coffee between us, notepad open, and I'm walking you through 5 questions every married couple should answer before the higher earner files. First, who is the higher earner in your household? And do you know their exact benefit amount at 62, at their full retirement age, and at 70? Pull that statement this week. Write all 3 numbers down. This is the foundation of everything else in this conversation. Second, have you calculated what the surviving spouse would actually receive under each of those 3 filing ages? This is simply the same 3 numbers from question 1, because in most cases, that is exactly what the survivor benefit will be. Seeing them side by side, specifically labeled as the survivor's future income, changes how the conversation feels. Third, has the higher earner and their spouse discussed this together, directly, using the words survivor benefit? This conversation is uncomfortable. It requires acknowledging that one of you will likely outlive the other. But having it once, calmly, at the kitchen table is far kinder than leaving it to be discovered in a moment of grief. Fourth, if the higher earner is considering filing before their full retirement age, have you discussed what that specifically means for the surviving spouse's future income? This does not mean the higher earner must delay. Health, family history, and immediate financial need are all legitimate reasons to file earlier. It simply means the decision should be made with full awareness of what it means for the person left behind. Fifth, do you have a plan for the years in between if the higher earner does decide to delay filing? Delaying only works if the household has a realistic way to cover expenses in the meantime. This is exactly the kind of scenario a Social Security specialist or fiduciary planner can model clearly, showing you the full income picture year by year. These 5 questions will not remove the sadness of losing a spouse someday, but they can make sure that when that day comes, the surviving spouse is not also discovering for the first time what their income will be. Here's my challenge to you after this video. This week, if you are married, sit down together, not separately, and pull both of your Social Security statements from SSA.gov. Write down each of your benefit amounts at 62, at full retirement age, and at 70. Second, identify which of you is the higher earner. Circle that person's 3 numbers. Say out loud, together, that whichever of those numbers is locked in will likely become the survivor benefit for whoever is left. Third, if the higher earner has not yet filed, schedule one conversation with a Social Security specialist before any filing decision is made. One conversation. Before, not after. Joan has since had this conversation with her own children, encouraging them to ask these questions with their own spouses long before retirement arrives. She cannot change her own situation, but she has made sure the people she loves will not face the same surprise. Pat still lives in the same house, on Mark's, her late husband's, locked-in benefit of $3,224 a month. She has told me that the conversation she and her husband had all those years ago gave her something beyond the dollars. It gave her the sense that he had thought about her future deliberately before he was gone. That is what this conversation is really about, not just a number on a page, a way of caring for someone you love in a moment you will not be there to help them through. You can always make more money. You cannot make more time. And you cannot go back and have this conversation after it is too late to matter. If this helped you see this decision a little differently today, do 3 things for me. Hit that like button so YouTube shows this to more married couples who need to have this conversation before one of them files, not after. Subscribe to The Quiet Retirement for more plain-spoken Social Security and Medicare explanations, the rules that actually affect your retirement income, one video at a time. And in the comments, if you are comfortable sharing, tell me whether you and your spouse have had this conversation. And if you have already lost a spouse, what do you wish someone had told you beforehand? I read every comment, and your words may help someone else. I'm Uncle John, reminding you your money is important, but your time and your health are priceless. Let's use the rules to your advantage, not theirs. I'll see you in the next one.